One afternoon at 4 p.m., a well-dressed woman in her late middle-aged, accompanied by her 14-year-old granddaughter, entered the museum. After making a 1-hour tour through all the rooms, they stopped to more closely examine the museum's prized exhibit, enclosed in a glass case without a pedestal. It was one of the world's largest and most perfect emeralds, the eye of the Jaguar. As Lou, the security guard, hurried off to continue his rounds, the couple tarried at the case, where the woman took special note of the 2 Allen head bolts which held the glass dome in place. On a windy, rainy winter's day about 6 months later, the museum only had 1 or 2 other callers. The grandmother timed the guards' circuits and observed the movements of other visitors. At the moment she felt she could act unnoticed, she applied a tool to the Allen bolts, working quickly and deftly. Within 30 seconds, the dome was in the child's hands, and the gem was in her pocket. The details may be a little different in real life, but Jerry Alter, who wrote these words, and Rita Alter, his wife, made off with their own version of the eye of the Jaguar in a wild art theft in 1985 that they almost got away with forever. Welcome to Capers and Cocktails, a true crime podcast that doesn't take itself too seriously and gives you something to enjoy while you listen. The following content may be disturbing to some. Discretion is advised. If you're enjoying one of our themed cocktails, ensure you're of legal drinking age and have fun, but drink responsibly. Woman Ochre was painted in 1955 by Willem de Kooning, a Dutch-American artist, and is an extension of his Woman series that he painted when he was living in Greenwich Village in Manhattan. Like the other paintings in the series, it featured a female figure, distorted and stylized into abstract shapes. The main colors in the painting are ochre, which I learned very recently is actually a color, like a reddish-like clay or maybe yellow color, anyway, as well as black, burnt sienna, and turquoise. The painting caused a bit of a stir back then because it used clear figures, which some abstract expressionists, like Jackson Pollock, thought went against the movement's focus on non-representational art. So snobby, geez. Art curator John Elderfield would say, quote, "He was using traditional techniques to make alarmingly modern paintings, and I think this hybrid quality made people uncomfortable," end quote. Feminists also criticized the series, saying it came across as misogynistic and seemed to show violent feelings towards the women in the paintings. Willem did not like that criticism and would say, quote, "Women irritate me sometimes. I painted that irritation into the Woman series," end quote. Willem's wife, Elaine, would say that Willem's mother was the inspiration for the painting. Some, well, actually many, in the things I read and watched about Woman Ochre, would say that it's the ugliest painting they've ever seen. If you're watching on YouTube, you'll have to tell me for yourself. I think it's not a way I'd want to honor my own mother in a painting. I'll just put it that way. But anyway, speaking of YouTube, are you following me there yet? You really should be. You'll get to see my beautiful face 3 times a month, and when I get my YouTube shorts act together, or if I do, maybe more often. Follow me on all the social media too. Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, and yes, TikTok, just to name, well, all of them, all the ones I'm on, yeah. And rate the podcast if you're a listener too. Share with a friend. Thank you, my cocktail conspirators. Thank you. All right, back to the Woman. For a few years after it was finished, Woman Ochre was displayed at the Martha Jackson Gallery in New York City. A wealthy collector from the East Coast, Edward Joseph Gallagher Jr., they're always a junior. Well, anyway, he bought the painting. Since he often vacationed in Arizona on dude ranches, he had a fondness for the state. He later donated the painting to the University of Arizona Museum of Art in memory of his 13-year-old son who had recently died in a boating accident, along with 200 other pieces of art. He made it clear the museum could never sell or give away any of the art. The painting was a large part of the museum's collection for several decades, until the day after Thanksgiving in 1985. On that morning, just before the museum was going to open, a museum employee arrived to open. The campus was basically empty, as you can imagine, because it was the day after Thanksgiving on this college campus, but a couple walked up just as he did. The woman, who appeared older, had reddish blonde hair. She was wearing a scarf in her hair, granny glasses, a red coat, and tan bell-bottoms. The man, described as in his late 20s, had dark brown hair and a rather goofy-looking, cartoonish mustache. He was wearing sunglasses and a dark blue coat with a hood. Even though the employee thought the coats were a little odd for the 55-degree weather, and he wasn't really sure about that mustache, he let them in. It was a museum, after all, meant for people to visit. The couple headed towards the upstairs of the museum. Midway up the stairs, the woman began asking the guard on duty about some of the artwork in the museum, while the man continued upstairs. Pretty quickly afterwards, the man came back down the stairs, and the pair rushed out of the building, driving away in a rust-colored two-door sports car with a black slatted panel on the back window. Odd. The guard also thought it was odd, so he went upstairs to see if anything was wrong, and something was very wrong. Woman ochre had been sliced out of its frame with a knife, leaving the frame hanging on the wall. The painting vanished. I'm sure the guard and probably the museum employee that day would both want to join us in a drink, eh? Today's drink is a very popular one from the 1950s, when Woman Ochre was born, and judging by how she looks, I think Willem de Kooning drank a fair share of them himself. Back in 1954, Professor Ramon Lopez Irizarry from the University of Puerto Rico came up with a better way to extract coconut cream. He patented the process and launched Coco Lopez, a sweet and creamy coconut product that became the key ingredient in the Pina Colada. Today, it's known as cream of coconut and is a go-to for making the iconic cocktail worldwide. As for who actually invented the Pina Colada, there's some debate, always. The Caribe Hilton Hotel says their bartender, Ramon Monchito Marrero, created it in 1954. He worked to perfect the recipe, aiming to capture the essence of Puerto Rico. And in 2004, the hotel even got a proclamation from Puerto Rico's governor celebrating the drink's 50th anniversary. But there's another claim. Ricardo Garcia, another bartender at the Caribe Hilton, says he made the first pina colada in 1953, a year earlier. And yet another story comes from Barachina, a restaurant in Puerto Rico. They say a Spanish bartender, Don Ramon Portas Miño, whipped up the now famous drink in 1963. Who's right? It's hard to say, but the pina colada has become a legend in its own right. No matter who made it, it's safe to say it's worth drinking. Grab the recipe from the description box. Back at the museum, investigators almost immediately hit a brick wall. There were no fingerprints found at the scene. That couple was in and out. There were no security cameras installed. They made sketches based on the recollection of the museum employee and the guard and distributed them to the public. The university's police department turned the case over to the FBI, but even the big guns couldn't turn anything up. There were absolutely no leads. The museum's insurance company paid $400,000 on the claim, and the museum used the money to buy security cameras. They changed their policy to go ahead and be closed the Friday after Thanksgiving. And they never replaced Woman Ochre, instead leaving the empty canvas hanging with a sign next to it, encouraging anyone with information to contact the FBI. And there the frame sat for over 30 years. In 1977, a couple moved to Cliff, New Mexico. Jerry Alter and Rita Alter had been married for 20 years at this point, and Jerry had recently retired, somehow only at age 47, from his job as a music teacher from the New York City Public Schools, and he and his wife Rita bought 20 acres of land near Gila National Forests. They built a pink stucco house there on a flat New Mexico plateau and filled it with eclectic art inside and out. The outside had a sculpture garden with busts of Beethoven and Molière, a swimming pool, and elaborate gardens where they raised chickens and ducks. They had 2 children who went to school in Cliff, where Rita was a speech therapist for many years. They always ate healthy and exercised a lot. They wanted to live forever. Jerry and Rita traveled the world, sometimes taking 2 or more trips per year. The amount of traveling they did sometimes struck their neighbors as a little bit odd. There's a book that Jerry wrote, and it said they had visited 140 countries on all 7 continents, including both polar regions. In June 2017, in Cliff, New Mexico, population 293 at that point, Rita Alter died at age 81. Her husband Jerry had died 5 years before. After Rita's death, their nephew, Ron Roseman, was named executor of the estate. He was living in Texas, and there was a bit of a time crunch to take care of everything in the home and the home itself. He did take pictures of the objects in the house and sent them to museums and even to Sotheby's, but no one was interested in any of the items in the house. They were like, it's junk. He handed over a large truck full of items to a local thrift store before hiring a realtor to sell the house. As Ron and Ruth, the realtor, toured the house, she actually noticed several items in the house that might be of interest to a friend, David Van Auker, who ran an antique store in nearby Silver City. Ron was like, okay, and he hired David to appraise the items in the house and buy what he wanted. When David arrived there with several other employees of the antique store, including his son, he was not overly impressed. The house was full of art, a lot of it painted by Jerry himself, like paintings all over the wall, like top to bottom, like floor to ceiling, a lot of which David thought was pretty ugly. David went into the bedroom and he bent down to pick up a fallen door from a cabinet when he looked over to his left, and barely visible behind the bedroom door was a painting in an ugly, out-of-place looking gilded gold frame. It had broad, angry brushstrokes and a sort of distinguishable figure of a woman. Upon further looking, he noticed that a screw had been screwed into the baseboard to prevent the doorknob from banging into the painting. The window on the side of the setting sun had a blackout curtain on it to block direct sunlight from the painting. David would say, quote, "It was odd how it had been hung in such a way that it was concealed from sight. But there were other things hung in odd ways in the house too. So many paintings crammed in the rear hallway and in the bathroom, so I didn't think much of it," end quote. David didn't recognize anything about the painting, but he thought it was okay. He thought it was pretty cool. So he took it, along with the rest of the contents of the house, for $2,000. The next day, they came back and piled the art and furniture in a truck, tossing the painting on top of the pile. And when he got back to his store in Silver City, about 30 minutes away, he propped the painting up temporarily in the store. His plan was to reframe it and hang it in his own guest house. The same day, a customer came into the antique store and immediately saw the little de Kooning signature at the bottom of the painting, immediately offering to pay $200,000. He was like, "I'll buy it right now, $200,000. Within an hour, 2 other customers also said that the painting was incredibly valuable. David's ears started to prickle a little bit, so he grabbed the painting and put it in the bathroom. It was the only room in the building that actually could lock, so he tossed it in the bathroom. He hopped on the internet, and after several pages of Google, it wasn't at the beginning, but several pages in, he found a 2015 article about a stolen painting that had at that point been missing for 30 years. It was the same painting, Woman Ochre. David immediately called the museum and told the student receptionist that he might have their stolen painting. The receptionist immediately put him through to curator Olivia Miller, who asked him to measure it. It was 1 inch off from its 40 by 30 inch dimensions, which makes sense because it was cut from its original frame. She asked him to send pictures. He snapped some with his phone and sent them to her. She understandably started freaking out. Then the FBI naturally needed to be called and get involved. The FBI told David to put the painting in a very safe place, so he took it home and hid it behind his sofa. He guarded it, actually. He had his gun and he guarded it all night long. He stayed up all night. The next day, things got a little hinky with a shady lawyer who ended up wanting to extort money for the painting, which David wasn't even thinking about doing. He wanted to give it back the whole time, but we're not going to get into that part of the story. When Olivia finally saw the painting in person, she fell to her knees and gasped, "Holy shitballs." She, as everyone else who worked at that museum, knew the painting super well, but had never seen it in person. By August 11th, the painting, now estimated at a value of $160 million, was fully authenticated as Woman Ochre and returned to its original home. It underwent an extensive, meticulous $1 million restoration, as it had been significantly damaged when it was rolled up after being cut from the frame. He rolled it up, shoved it in his jacket. But now it is back on display in the museum, next to a picture of David and his son. David declined any reward, saying, quote, "We returned something that was stolen, and that's something everyone should do," end quote. Yeah, David, you're right. As a show of gratitude, they gave David the golden frame that the painting had been put in after being stolen, and it hung in that original spot they wanted to hang the painting in their guest house. It was signed by everyone involved in the rescue and eventual restoration of the painting. They say it is the best gift they could have been given. So what happened? Well, I'll start by saying the FBI has ruled this inconclusive. God, the FBI, they love saying it's inconclusive. But is it inconclusive? Let's start with the fact that the painting was in the Alter's house, hidden in their bedroom, behind their bedroom door where only they would be able to look at it. Most people who visited the house had never seen it. They did have a neighbor who was an artist who had painted 2 of them on horseback in the Himalayas, a painting they also had in their bedroom. They once let this neighbor come take a picture of the painting, and she noticed Woman Ochre and asked the Alters about it. They did not answer her questions and did not want to talk about it. That artist would also say, quote, "I painted his face. I know the contour of his face. When I saw the sketch of the suspects in the theft, I knew it was him," end quote. I don't know how, but she knew. Investigators determined that Woman Ochre had been on that wall behind that door for a while. Not only were there dusty cobwebs between the frame and the wall, the space behind the painting was lighter and free from dust, with a visible outline where the painting had hung. And it turns out they were there in Tucson the weekend of the crime. Ron's family lived in Tucson in 1985, and the Alters came for Thanksgiving dinner that year with their sister and sister-in-law. There is a picture of them at dinner the day before the painting was stolen. Ron has said that they would often stay with them and would leave for the days, hiking or visiting places locally. The Alters traveled in a red two-door Toyota Supra sports car during that time period. Hello. This bit of evidence is also wild to me. Okay, get ready. Rita Alter actually kept a detailed diary and a day planner. She documented everything from medications they took to what they ate and where they went. Thanksgiving weekend, 1985, those pages are blank. Strange. Okay, and let's just dive into another one of Jerry's short stories, shall we? This one is called The Thrill Seekers. Yes, in his veiled autobiographical book of short stories about he and Rita's world travels, there are actually 2 short stories about art thefts. I mean, come on. Here's just one paragraph. At home in Paris, Georges and Susie lived a conservative life ostensibly. They owned a thriving accounting practice and enjoyed a very comfortable lifestyle in an affluent and fashionable neighborhood. But they had a double life. Highly acquisitive by nature, both were thrill seekers of a particular variety. Rather than seeking stimulation from activities such as skydiving, hang gliding, or Russian roulette, they satisfied their psychological need by jeopardizing their freedom in a succession of larcenies. But they were extremely nonviolent and would never use weapons or force in their exploits. They saw themselves as masters of victimless crimes. Y'all. Let's not forget that Rita and Jerry Alter traveled a lot, 140 countries a lot, on teachers' salaries. And remember, Jerry retired in 1977 at age 47. So on Rita's speech therapist and a public school salary, their bank account, after Rita died, had over $1 million in it. I was a teacher for a while, and I did not travel to 1 to 2 countries per year and save money at the rate to have $1 million in the bank when I died. I'm just saying. Their nephew would say, quote, I guess they figured they were being frugal, end quote. Okay. Oh, also that thrift store where Ron donated a bunch of stuff. Well, they noticed some other art in the donations, the thrift store employees. And when they called Sotheby's, well, Sotheby's was paying more attention, I guess, because the other pieces of art were auctioned to the tune of $160,000. How on earth were they getting that much money? Is it possible that Woman Ochre wasn't their first or their only theft? It wasn't Georges and Susie's, the fictional couple, first crime either. Maybe they were stealing and selling and buying and selling all over the globe. Explains the traveling, that's for sure. For what it's worth, most people who actually knew the Alters are stunned and don't think it's possible. Rita's younger sister told the New York Times they wouldn't, quote, risk something as wild and crazy as grand larceny, risk the possibility of winding up in prison for God's sakes. They wouldn't do that, end quote. Although, more recently, she has said, quote, before I was tending to think Jerry might have bought that painting at an estate sale in Scottsdale or something. Now, if it turned out that he and Rita stole it, it strikes me as kind of thrilling. I kind of love it. My brother and his wife as Bonnie and Clyde, end quote. Okay. His neighbor called Jerry a fantastic guy, but some family friends believe that if they did do it, it was all Jerry and that Rita was just going along with Jerry's schemes. Y'all, does Occam's razor even apply in this situation? Like, the painting was covered in dust in their own house, please. The case has never been officially closed by the FBI, so who knows? Maybe something is coming soon. But why would they have done it? There are lots of theories, from them having seen the painting when they lived in the area in New York City, to Jerry being jealous of Willem de Kooning's success. I mean, I've seen de Kooning's paintings, whatever. To something a little more personal. But those are just speculation. I guess I'll leave you with the ending of The Eye of the Jaguar from the intro to today's episode. A confession? I don't know. I guess you'll have to tell me. In a room several miles away from the place in which it transpired, a plush couch is centered against one wall. Above the couch, a single beam of light is focused on a panel in the center of the opposite wall. At the press of a button on the arm of the couch, the panel slides to one side, revealing a gleaming silver frame surrounding a foot-square box lined with black velvet. Hanging by a golden chain at its center is a stunning 120-carat emerald, unique in the entire world. and 2 pairs of eyes exclusively are there to see. End quote. Thanks for hanging out with me. Gosh, how I wish the Alters had written some kind of confession letter or something, told somebody something. I mean, they definitely stole the painting, let's be serious. But how else did they afford all of those fancy trips on? How else did they have at least $160,000 of other art in their house? I don't know, man. Sounds fishy to me. In the words of Jerry himself, quote, "To own wealth is to be possessed by it," end quote. In 2 weeks, we're going much more basic, unoriginal, I'd say, with the burglary of a Brinks facility in 1950. The perfect crime until it wasn't. And the drink? A little something called the Midas touch. Find those ingredients in the description box. I'll see you in 2 weeks, my cocktail conspirators, and remember, there are always alternatives to stealing $1 million painting and hiding it behind your bedroom door for 30 years.